But at the end of the day, if you are looking at, if you're staring down a prescription drug in the face, you can fix things with diet.
Welcome to Price Plow.
What's happening, Price Plow Nation and everyone out there on YouTube? This is Mike Roberto, founder of Price Plow, and today we're going to discuss my blood work and how I changed some stuff in my diet to significantly alter some parts of my lipid panel. And it'll be arguable, but I'm thinking it's for the better. So if you're here, and there's many reasons you might be here, but if you're here, I just want to first off let you know that everything I do, this should not be considered to be medical advice, and I am not a doctor or nurse or any medical practitioner whatsoever. However, I've become very in tune with the way these things work, and I am very happy to share my blood work with you. I want you to know that if you have a terrible batch of blood work, it can be changed with dietary intervention. You need to find a doctor who's going to work with dietary intervention first, if you're willing to do so. And you may not have to go on statins, unless you want to be sore all your life and maybe save 4 days of your life. Basically, if you are willing to change the way you eat, you can fix your blood work. So there's going to be some people that are looking for that information. And then there's going to be other people who are in my boat who are kind of trying to tweak and optimize. And that's kind of what I've done here. So a few months back, what happened was I went to the doctor to get a lipid panel, and they tried to prescribe me statins at the age of 37 because my LDL cholesterol is high. I then went down the rabbit hole, and because my HDL is also high and my triglycerides are very low and my HbA1c is low and my fasting insulin levels, or not enough doctors are giving, my insulin levels are low. Because of all of that, despite the high LDL, I showed that every observational study that was on non-drug participants, because I'm not on drugs or any statins or anything like that, were actually very low risk for a cardiovascular event or heart attack or mortality. And because of that, I dumped that doctor and decided to go on my way. However, being the optimizer, at the end of that video, that blog post went viral, the video did pretty well. At the end of that video, I said, well, I'm in the second to lowest risk group in the Framingham study. I had a 0.7 hazard ratio, and 1.0 is like average, 0.7 is less than average, less likely to have a cardiovascular event. I was actually like, maybe I can get in the lowest group. There's a few groups out there that have 0.6. So we decided to tweak things. And the answer is that you can change your risk profile by changing your diet. It's typically going to be done with a low-carb diet. With low-carb diets, and if you switch to a low-carb or ketogenic diet, your blood work, that's why you need to go to a doctor like Dr. Tro in the tri-state area, Tro Collation, who is my coach and helped me out with this. He's not my doctor, he's my coach. You need to go to a doctor who understands this, because your lipid profile, if you're going from like being obese or diabetic into a low carb or ketogenic diet, your lipid profile is going to be all over the place for months. You need to understand that. Don't be worried, but you need to be with a doctor who can coach you towards that. I've been a little bit more stable, being that I've been on a low carb diet for quite some time, and now I'm kind of in the perfection range where if I change things for a month or two, I notice them on the lipid profile, and it's actually kind of beginning to get a little bit predictable. So in that video, given that I had the high LDL, high HDL, low triglyceride profile, there's actually a lipidologist, a lipid scientist, may I say, named Dave Feldman, who is coining this a lean mass hyperresponder. And what he's noticed is that there's a lot of individuals like myself who are quite lean, like for guys, sub 15% body fat, maybe a little bit more or whatever. And I'm like between 13 and 14% body fat, who they eventually, they get so lean that their LDL cholesterol start going up, but because they have low triglycerides, the high HDL, and they seem to be incredibly healthy. We never get sick apparently, and that's kind of true for myself as well. So we made that video. And then Dr. Tro and I decided, well, maybe we could tweak this though. And so I decided to try 100 grams of carbohydrates per day. But before I did that, I had to run it a little bit harder because I wanted to get an NMR lipo profile. And I only got one of those. We're not going to get those every time because they're expensive. And LabCorp, it's a further drive. That's where you have to go to get that test and everything. But I went like basically full bore on a super near carnivore diet. I'm talking like I had like 5 carbs per day for a few weeks, and then I did one last round of blood work. And this definitely put me well into this lean mass hyperresponder mode where I was like on super low carb, low body fat-ish kind of lipid profile here. And so let's just really quickly recap what happened there. And then let's talk about what happened with 100 grams of carbohydrates per day and all the lessons learned. And then we can debate whether or not it's really better or not. But I'm going to throw my opinions in for the matter. But ultimately, if you're here and you're seeing this title, this video is titled like how a low carb diet fixed my cholesterol levels or whatever clickbait we end up using, the fact is that I'm actually coming and I'm going to re-increase my carbs. 100 grams of carbohydrates for me is a high carb diet. But I think it might be closer to the optimal diet than a carnivore for me, given how things seem to work for me. At the other end of the spectrum, some of you might be like 100 grams of carbs is super low carb, and that's true. And I think it could do you wonders to shift towards that. But 100 grams is also kind of no man's land because you're not fully dependent on ketones, you're not fully dependent on carbohydrate, and you kind of like, it's a weird area. So I think I'm gonna try dropping it a little bit lower. But anyway, here's what happened after like basically a carnivore style diet. And this hasn't been published yet. It will be with a blog post associated with this as well. So my triglycerides went all the way down to 46, which is down from 66 before. My HDL went up a little bit to 66. This is good, up from 59. And then my LDL cholesterol went up to 205, up from 193. Now Dave Feldman in lean mass hyperresponders, the LMHRs, they usually use 200 as their break point for like if you are a lean mass hyperresponder. So I kind of broke that threshold finally. I'm one of the gang as of that time. This was done in April actually. And my total cholesterol went up to 280, up from 269. Now these aren't crazy high numbers compared to some people, but most doctors will be like, oh my God, the LDL is so high. And so anyway, my non-HDL numbers were 214, up just a bit from 210. Now your standard doctor is told you got to prescribe a statin at that point because of the LDL, but if you look at the data, not a very big risk because the stronger risk factors are HDL and triglyceride. So the ratios of interest here, cholesterol to HDL-C was 4.24, which is down from 4.56. So like things improved, in my opinion, by going further into carnivore. And with this number, you want to be under 4.5, under 4.0 is even better. I kind of got closer to that. And then my triglyceride to HDL ratio tanked. That went down to 0.70, down from 1.12 because my trigs went so down. And so you want that to be under 2.0, 1.2 is even better, and I'm well below that. And then some other important numbers. Here's a funny, going near carnivore, and then, you know, LabCorp and Quest Diagnostics, I'm going to be sticking with Quest from now on, but I did this at LabCorp, so they might have some different measurements of it all. But looking at my HbA1c, it actually went up to 5.4 from 5.2. And that's kind of funny. I think like when you go on a carnivore diet, your cruising altitude of blood sugar levels actually kind of elevate a little bit. And I think I pushed myself a little bit in that direction. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to A1C as I add carbs. My insulin, fasting insulin was 3.0 at this point. We're still talking about my near carnivore numbers, and you want this to be under 4.5. Screw the reference ranges of this one. Dr. Andy Fung is the guy to ask on this. Under 4.5 is where you want this to be. Otherwise, you're running into some problems. If you are loaded with insulin all the time, that is what's the most damaging thing. And what's crazy is that we just have diabetics inject themselves with insulin all day long. It's mind-blowing. Anyway, homocysteine was right in the middle of 7.5. CRP was 0.88. LPA 2. So very, very good numbers in general. I'm very proud of these numbers. And then finally, we did an oral glucose tolerance test. I did a video where I ate 75 grams of dextrose from Sweet Tarts, of course, and my blood sugar just stayed up high at just under 200, and then finally came tanking down. It was very interesting. Now, 200 is not that bad. A diabetic would be like way higher than that. But I want to see if my body can handle it better. And the way to do that is to periodize some carbohydrates in. So Dr. Tro and I we're like, okay, well, what happens if I do some carbs here? And the question was 100 grams of carbohydrates per day. And that was kind of just an arbitrary number set based upon some other stuff that we'd seen. Oh, and finally, my testosterone and estrogen. If you've been following this channel, you know that this is a fun one to watch. My testosterone, total and free testosterone actually, on the near carnivore diet, my total testosterone was at 735. But my free testosterone, and this is with LabCorp's different reference range, was 7.6 picograms per milliliter. And the reference range was 8.7 to 25.1. So that was a low one. And that was a little bit of concern. Those of you who have watched this channel closely know that we kind of got that fixed, but I'm still in the low end of the reference range. And I think as a low-carb dieter, that's how things are going to be with free testosterone. But my total testosterone is kind of the story there. So that's been a fun one. So all things told, I think these are great numbers. But the optimizer in me was wondering, hey, can we do a little bit better? What happens if we bring in some carbs? Is this lean mass hyperresponder mode really the optimal way to live year round? And we'll get into that later. So we decided to do 100 grams of carbs per day. Now, I had a couple of rough weeks. I was doing 100 grams of carbs per day, but I wasn't perfectly tracking everything. And that's when I went and got my final set of testosterone and free and total testosterone. And that's where I was at 681 in the total testosterone. And then where were we at? 63.5 for free testosterone. And that's when we began a whole month of 100 grams of carbs per day, super diligently. And I did a supplement review. It was a natural testosterone booster known as B Super Test Max. So that could be a minor confound here, admittedly. But the numbers were fun and it was a good month. So here's what happened after a month of diligent 100 grams of carbs per day. Watch what happens here. My triglycerides, and we're gonna call these my low carb lipids. My triglycerides down to 41. Down from 46 and 66. I don't know why they went even lower. HDL also though went down a little bit. It was at 56, down from 66 and 59. We'll get into that. But here's the big story. LDL down to 125, all the way down from 205 to 193. I basically was wondering if I periodize some carbs into my day, preferably around my workout, can I drop LDL? And the answer is yes. So my total cholesterol was down to 193, no longer setting off alarms on these blood tests. It was down from 280 and 269. And that meant my non-HDL cholesterol went down to 69, down from 214 and 210. So this would make your standard lipidologist a lot happier. And truth be told, it did actually move me into the lowest risk group on the Framingham study. I am now in the sub 130, barely, but sub 130 LDL, but my triglycerides were still low enough, below 100, easily below 100, and my HDL was still high enough to put me in a group that was a 0.6 hazard ratio rather than 0.7. And in my opinion, it's also a bit more of a known group, at least like to cycle in and out of on occasion over the long term. So now let's take the ratios that are really important. My cholesterol to HDL-C down to 3.45, which was formerly 4.24 and 4.56. You want this to be under 4.0 if you're optimizing. I definitely had that. And then finally, my triglyceride to HDL ratio was just up a little bit, 0.73, up from 0.70, but also still down from the 1.12 I originally came in with. You still want this to be under 1.2 optimally, and or 2.0, but I'm like well below that. So other important numbers. Now here's what's funny. After 100 grams of carbs per day, my A1C went back down to 5.2. So compare that to 5.4, 5.2. It seems like that's right around where I'm at. And I think that's a really good number in terms of longevity. Too low of an A1C, I think, is just as bad as too high of an A1C if you get like to the absurd numbers. So like, kind of like a J-shaped curve, if anything. So maybe it's not as bad as the super high A1Cs, but going super low isn't necessarily a great thing either. And it's kind of funny, like a certain amount of carbs put me in a slightly lower sweet spot than having like basically zero carbs, which I find pretty interesting. Insulin also went down. My fasting insulin was down to 2.2, like really low. And so that's kind of interesting. And what we saw with my glucose tolerance test, and we can link back to that video, is that I was able to handle my 75 grams of carbs from sweet tarts way better than I was able to do so after the carnivore diet. So my body was basically, I put myself in a state where I was more metabolically flexible. I think flexibility is a great thing. You want to be able to throw whatever life's going to throw at you. I want to be able to fast and not feel harm, not feel hungry all the time. But I also want to be able to like bump into a pot of honey and be able to eat it and have a good party time without getting sick to myself too. And I think I am more able to do that, even though the glucose tolerance test kind of ended in a big disaster. And I was like on the roller coaster, and I really don't like the roller coaster. And so like overall, we'll talk about the impression I had on this month. I think 100 grams of carbohydrates is slightly annoying and slightly too much, so we're going to try to refine things, but I do think that these numbers in general are a little bit better. They put me into a more of a known state. And then of course, We got to mention, after the Super Test Maximum supplement review, I've never had a natural testosterone this high, but my total testosterone went up to 791. Was that the carbs? I don't think so, because I was carbing up before on the 681. The carbs actually dropped me. Then I end up at 791. So I think it was the ashwagandha and friends in the Super Test Maximum, but definitely introduced a compound. Got to mention it. And then the free testosterone up just a little bit, insignificant, 66.5. Still on the lowish end of the reference range, but still up a bit. So I'll probably try to like keep taking boron, at least like cycling on and off a little bit. So if you look at the studies, like I said, this actually put me into the lowest risk group for the Framingham study and then one other study. But we do also need to add, though, that in the Jepsen study, I was actually bumped out of the lowest risk group because my HDL, the way they break down HDL was if you have HDL above like 57 or higher, then you're in the lowest risk group. My HDL is 56, so I just squeaked out of that group. But overall, it's kind of like I hedged my bets a little bit in that this whole lean mass hyperresponder mode, for people who are as lean as me, I think it's like kind of an unknown state. We'll talk about that, a bit of an unknown state to be in year round. Obviously, our bodies are super adapted to do so many awesome things. You start realizing, like if you're obese watching this, like your body's protecting you. It is actually doing exactly what you're programming it to do, and it is protecting you from death. It is just, you're giving it stuff to store fat, and it's storing it as fat, and it's protecting you from death. It's amazing how well we adapt. And in the same case with where I'm at, when you are on a very low carbohydrate diet and you're already lean, well, your body has no choice at some point. There's no more triglycerides really to pump out, or my body's like resisting pumping out more triglycerides, so it just starts pumping out LDL. It's a totally different energy flux. It's really cool that we can do it and we can adapt to it. But the question is this something that we're supposed to do year round? Like forever? Be like a skinny guy keto? Yeah, I like the focus and everything, but at the end of the day, no one knows. And that's the truth. Whereas if we look at animals in nature, and if we look at humans in nature who are still like not the Eskimos, and I didn't descend from Eskimos, so I'm not going to count that anyway, but if we look at the humans who are still tribal, when they have access to the carbohydrates during the summer, and especially the summer and autumn harvest seasons, you're damn right they're going to eat them, and they eat a lot of them. So we like to like defer all this natural stuff, but you know, obviously they're on their feet a lot more and everything too. But when the carbs are available, at least during certain parts of the year, hey, it's time to fatten up for the winter. So I do believe that this is a proper strategy, or a good strategy, to cycle carbs in once in a while. I don't think you want to be in crazy keto mode year freaking round, as long as you're like myself and you don't have an addiction problem where, you know, you're just going to go off the rails. There's some people that they eat those sweet tarts like I did. I was like so done with it by the end. There's people who are off the rails and they're like off to the store buying 10 tubs of ice cream and we don't see them for 3 weeks. That wasn't me. But if you are that person, then you know what? I would take the lean mass hyperresponder mode. If you can get that lean, I would, and you know you have an addiction problem or alcoholic problem or anything like that, yeah, I would actually stick with the keto if you know that you can't handle the carbs. Me, during workouts, I can take those carbs for a workout and then I can just kind of like reset after that. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking is starting to be a little bit more optimal for me, at least during parts of the year. But at the same time, people are going to argue, hey, you know what? You did tank your LDL 39%, but at the expense of dropping HDL 15%. Was that a worthy trade-off? Yeah, we're in a lower risk group with this, like 2 of these studies, but is that still optimal? And the answer is, I don't know. At that point, we're kind of like over-optimizing a little bit. I do like to keep HDL high, and I think, to me, there's a middle ground between 50 and 75 carbs where I think I can accomplish all my goals. And that's what we're going to go with, or with the next little set of experiments and everything. But in general, I think this is kind of like a quality bet hedge, where I no longer am like in this maniacal mode where maybe over the course of time that maybe that LDL will get oxidized, even if I don't eat this disgusting seed oils, which you should never eat. Even if I don't touch those, and those are the ones that oxidize the LDL the most, just so you know. Anyway, even if I don't eat those, having all that LDL flying around over the course of time, that might get oxidized and that might cause endothelial damage. We just don't know the long course. If I could hedge against that, it might be a worthy bet to make. And let's be honest, with the carbohydrates, I get some easy calories that are tasty and you get a little bit of that rush, and you can go and use it to work out, and I don't seem to have any deleterious effects from it. I'm able to usually get back into ketosis later on. So I kind of am working on the best of both worlds of metabolic flexibility. And at the end of the day, I'm treating this kind of like a performance enhancing drug. I'm almost treating it like caffeine. And that's where I'm starting to go with a lot of this. And hey, you know what? If you can handle the carbs are fun. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole thing. I do think that the lean mass hyper-responder mode is far better than being obese or diabetic or anything. But I think for some of us, and I'm not saying I'm like a bodybuilder, stage-ready bodybuilder or anything like that, but it's like very easy for me to like diet for a day or two and see my abs really well and all that. I don't think that once you're this lean, it's okay to bring carbohydrates back. I think you can periodize carbohydrates back so long as you don't go off the rails. And I know that I won't do that. And so I prefer that over the unknown state, unless of course, you're done if you have a single carbohydrate. And in that case, I think the carnivore diet is a fantastic thing. If you're watching this from the complete opposite end, and you're willing to do basically anything it takes to get right, to get fixed, to get off the meds, seriously, and you're like, whatever it takes, I'm all in on everything, dude, find a good doctor, go carnivore. It will do things that you never imagined possible. And for me, what it does though, and this is like bad to the point where I lose too much weight, I'm just not hungry. I'm like hungry like once a day on that diet, and I lose too much weight. So you can say what you want about calories in, calories out. It's really a game of hunger and the hunger hormones. And when you are a full carnivore dieter, those hormones just tank, and you are simply never hungry, and it's honestly like freedom. But at the same time, that's not my goal right now. My goal is actually to see if we can do something else. I've gotten a little bit too small, I've gotten a little bit too light, a little bit too skinny, and I've lost a little bit too much strength. So now the question is this: can I, and this will be kind of the next month or two, I think we're going to join fitness and performance transformation contest, can I periodize in these carbohydrates during and before my workouts, and maybe a little bit after if I'm doing a little CGM, experiment, having some fun. We did have some fun during those last couple of months. I did the oatmeal bananas blood sugar child abuse demonstration, which is a video you got to watch if you're not sure what I'm talking about there. But basically, eating carbs alone is a bad idea. So anyway, we did have some fun with that. I want to see how many carbs I could throw in before and during my workout, but still be able to keep my LDL low, my HDL high, triglycerides low, have stellar workouts. I want to be able to add lean mass. And this is going to be the controversial point right here. I do not think on a keto or carnivore style diet, it is easy at all to add any significant amount of lean mass, unless you're on steroids. At least not for me. It just doesn't seem to happen. I do think I need that insulin spike. And that insulin spike needs to come from carbohydrates, preferably the carbohydrates that don't mess me up. So I'm talking about yams, white rice. I can handle brown rice, but white rice is just like crack to me. I love the white rice. The occasional sweet tarts, but I don't like that roller coaster too much. The dextrose is a little bit too much. And then supplements like cluster dextrin, great for performance, or the carb 10 based off of pea starch, which is awesome if you just want the slow roller kind of insulin spike and blood sugar spike. That's where I want to go to see if I can slam the carbohydrates, add a little bit of lean mass, keep the LDL and all those lipids in line, but, and here's the final but, by the end of the day or maybe by the end of my nighttime fast, see if I can spit out some ketones in the meantime. Like even if I'm at just a 0.3 kind of ketone level. I do think the ketones are super therapeutic, great for the joints, great for inflammation. They're healthy for the muscles. They're super healthy for the brain. And I don't like to be driven by glucose, but I do like to have a little bit of that carbohydrate drug before a workout. I want to be metabolically flexible. I want to be able to handle everything. And that's where I'm going with this next. But the long story short is that I was able to go from one extreme back slightly back to a more normal area, and I believe that my lipids improved. But I think we can still optimize a little bit more, and I'm still in an area where it's difficult to build muscle, and that's a bit of what I want to do next. And obviously the sleep issue is going to have to continue and everything, and that's always going to be a challenge. But at the end of the day, if you are looking at, if you're staring down a prescription drug in the face, you can fix things with diet. You don't need to go crazy extreme unless you're just all in and you are obese and you're sick of being hungry and miserable all the time. We can talk about that in another video. You can change this. If your blood pressure is high, it's not salt that's causing the blood pressure for about 95% of us. It's the other white stuff called sugar. You can change all this, but it's not going to take a YouTube doctor to do it. It's going to take a real doctor. Go and enlist with someone like Dr. Tro or one of the other low-carb friendly doctors, and you can change things. But at some point, and I hope you get to the point where you're sub 15% body fat, if you can handle the addiction, I think it's time for some of us to bring back the carbohydrate, at least during the summer and in the autumn, when it's natural for us to fatten up. Let's do it. And that's where we're at. So I thank you for watching. That's the latest and greatest on my journey here as I try to tweak and perfect and refine and just learn about myself and just get connected with myself, and you'll start to notice. And wearing a constant glucose monitor, it's expensive, but it is the coolest thing on the planet. You will realize that sometimes you're not really tired. Sometimes you're not really cranky. Sometimes you're just crashing from eating stupid crap like carbs all alone. You can fix this. You can monitor this. It takes work. But once you cut the cord, once you cut the carbohydrate addiction and you get more fat adapted, you're not going to be hungry all the time. You don't need to eat 2 hours every 2 hours. You don't need to worry about that stuff. And that's what's fun. So I'm well beyond all of that. Now I'm kind of perfecting. But I just want you to know that you're not in this alone, and that there are doctors out there who can help you, who are actually de-prescribing medication. But for the time being, yeah, maybe you do need to take some meds, but it's not forever. And that's what you need to know. My name is Mike Roberto. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Once again, I'm not a doctor. This is not advice, and these are my experiences only. But I think I am very, very proud of my blood work. I'm proud of my testosterone levels. Now it's time to go and do something with it. So let's try just a slight bit of lean gains. What do you think? Thanks for watching. Hit the comments below. Let me know what you want. Check out the blog post that's associated with this. You want to see the studies, and then we'll have a lot more data on the first blog post where I talk about it in the first case. Thanks again for watching.
Welcome to Price Plow.